tell me the story of us.
Again? All right, Francis. We are gonna take over the world.
You'll be this awesomely bitchy publishing mogul.
And you'll be this famous modern dancer, and I'll publish a really expensive book about you.
The D-bags we make fun of will put on their coffee tables.
And we'll co-own a vacation apartment in Paris.
And we'll have lovers.
And no children.
And we'll speak at college graduations.
And honorary degrees.
So many honorary degrees.
I don't know if there's ever a right way or a wrong way to feel about a movie, but in the case of Frances Ha, I felt way more optimistic than I probably should have. Maybe I need to get my head examined, but something about watching this young woman in the peak of her struggle era felt all too relatable. And as the movie title suggests, we follow Frances, a young woman who goes soul searching after her best friend Sophie moves out. And Frances and Sophie feel less like best friends and more like an old couple. They spend so much time together that they might as well be one person. When they're not at work building their amazing careers, they are play fighting, writing, working out, reading, sometimes together, sometimes alone. Everything starts to change when Frances breaks up with her boyfriend, and at the same time, Sophie informs her that she would like to move out with someone else in a better apartment. This sends Frances spiraling. She's almost like, feels like she was woken up from a very peaceful sleep, and it honestly feels like she has to figure out what she's gonna do with the rest of her life. And nothing about Sophie's life comes as a surprise to Frances. I mean, this is her best friend. She knows that she's in a long-term relationship. She knows that she's very ambitious. What comes as a surprise to Frances is that she's not as ready to move on with her life like her friend is. In fact, she is nowhere near ready. And now that Sophie's life is accelerating, Frances just suddenly feels like she's in the position where she either has to catch up or let her friend go and move on. And this movie is not for everyone. Like, it doesn't really have a beginning, middle, and end. It just follows Frances through this tumultuous tunnel until we reach a light at the end. And we're not sure when she moves in and out of places. The movie doesn't really waste time with explanations or goodbyes. It just moves forward with Frances. And the only way we can kind of measure where she's at is where she's living or not living and how well she thinks her best friend is doing without her. And every time Frances is in a new position, it feels like she's gotten better, but it also feels like she's gotten significantly worse. But she's realizing what's important to her, and the first is her best friend, and the second is trying to build this career in the dance world. And the most impressive thing about Frances, and I think that's probably why I wasn't as depressed as maybe some people will be, like, you can watch this and feel very sad, but she maintains a sense of gratitude, and she's kind of like a glass is half full person. Like, she's thankful for what she has, and that keeps her going. And she never really falls into the trap of comparison. And you see that in the way that she moves. You see that in how she interacts with other people. Like, the only time she seems to have a chip on her shoulder is when her friend Sophie comes up. But other than that, it doesn't matter if she's with her peers, with college students that she's significantly older than. She never acts better. She never acts beneath. She's just like the same Frances regardless of where she is. And when her friend moves out, she kind of resists the urge to move in with her own boyfriend and pretend like she has her life together also. Instead, she like buckles down and tries to make her dreams come true. Now, the problem is she keeps hitting a wall. And the reason that she keeps hitting this wall is because she just is suddenly more aware of all the things that she's not. And she's convinced that the only way to get her friend back is to make it. But that just sucks the joy out of everything, right? It's no longer fun. She went from kind of enjoying the process to just kind of really soul searching and asking herself the hard questions, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is the purpose of this? Do I even care anymore? Like, she kind of took it to levels that were so extreme. It's like, sis, she's still your friend, but like just in a different type of way. And the film doesn't narrate anything for us, even though it kind of does. Like, she doesn't need to speak for us to know what she's thinking. Like, we watch her alone by herself, walking around. She always seems distracted, but we know why she's distracted. We know what's on her mind, and I thought that was so clever. Like, there was a lot that she was communicating without even saying a word. And this situation with her best friend basically forces her to go inward and really, figure out where do we go from here? It's upwards and onwards. And the film starts and Frances is just chilling. There is no sense of urgency. We know that she wants to become a dancer, but there's no specific timeline for this. She's an instructor and she has the skills to become a choreographer. She's not that confident in her skills, but she's not that interested. She wants to become a famous modern dancer. And that dream seems entirely possible, but she's not that interested. She wants to become a famous modern dancer. And that dream seems entirely possible until her boss tells her one day that they can't really use her as a dancer. And this sends her spiraling out of control. She felt like she was kind of on track, and then this news came at a bad time. And all the opportunities that Frances takes advantage of at the end of the movie, they were made available to her at the start of the movie. Like, her boss feels bad. She tries to give her a desk job. She tries to offer her the studio so she can choreograph some routines. But Frances is like, you know what? Nope. Upwards and onwards. I'm moving on to better things. I might not be dancing here, but that doesn't mean I can't dance somewhere else. Of course, this decision leads her to rock bottom, and she's looking for lightning in a bottle. She wants so badly to be recognized for her work, but not for herself, but to prove to her best friend that she's still worthy of being her best friend. Everywhere she goes, she discusses her like it's over, like they're a divorced couple. She mourns her, she resents her, she feels like she lost a part of herself, and she still refers to them as best friends, so there's some hope. But she doesn't really like the idea that they're not the same, or they're not seen as the same. Anytime someone mentions that Sophie's more mature or more well-read, she's like, no, we're basically the same person. Like, she's not any better than I am. And her friend's departure opens up just a hole where she starts to just feel inadequate, and she starts to hyper-focus on all these things that aren't actually a big deal, but because her friend is gone, she feels like it's a big deal. She starts cleaning up after herself. She starts quoting books that she hasn't read, or at least fully read, and she just starts slowly but surely to start doubting herself. And you see this when she takes this random trip to Paris. And this part really tripped me out, because the reason she goes to Paris is because she's sitting with a group of more accomplished adults, and as she's looking around, she realizes that she is not at the point in her life where she can buy apartments in Paris and take vacations. She doesn't have a place to live. She doesn't have money. And she just gets frustrated, right? Like, why is it that why can't one day be today? If my friend can go to Japan and live her best life, then I can go to France and live my best life. I thought it was so funny that she was willing to accept living in this apartment with these total strangers instead of taking a job. And again, she so badly wants to prove that she's moving forward any means necessary. And of course, she takes out a credit card and goes to Paris. And this trip is far from magical. And the way she walks around Paris, it's as if she's not even in Paris. Like, there's no change in her behavior. And she still feels the same as she did in New York. And while she's in Paris, she keeps calling her friend, asking to hang out, asking to link up. So she does know someone there. And by the time this friend reaches out to her, she's gone. And this friend basically invites her to a dinner party to meet all her artistic and wonderful friends. And of course, in an ideal world, Frances would have stayed one more day, met these people, and who knows, maybe she would not have gone back to New York. Maybe she would have met more interesting people and started a far more successful career in Paris. But that's not how reality works, but that's kind of what she was hoping for, more or less. She returns to New York feeling way worse than when she left. And a lot of the reason she feels worse is while she was in Paris, her friend Sophie calls her and tells her she's moving to Japan to start a blog. And of course, Frances is the last to hear about this, and it's just frustrating. Every time her friend calls her, she's more grown up, right? Here she is, engaged, moving abroad to live her best life, and Frances is broke and unemployed and can't even tell her friend that she's embarrassed, because the whole thing, in hindsight, was just a horrible idea. And she knew it was a horrible idea when she got on that plane. Like, her reaction on that plane, like, she knew she knew she shouldn't have gone on it. This decision to go to Paris is kind of like, well, what you can do, I can do better, right? Like, why are you moving forward and I can't? And her life did not change going to Paris any more than her, her best friend Sophie's life changed when she went to Japan. We find out later that things are not exactly as they appear. Frances wants so badly for her life to change, and sometimes when we want something to change, we force situations that are not natural. And when you do this, you basically send out a message to the universe that you don't trust it, that you're not sure that you're going to make it. And Frances is losing confidence. And the further she gets from her friend emotionally and physically, the further away she gets from her career. And she's honestly wondering, like, she was supposed to make it with her. They were supposed to do this together, but that's just not how life works. Sometimes you got to do things alone, and the more alone that she is, she's really kind of wondering, like, why am I doing what I'm doing, and do I even still want to do it? When she returns to Paris, she leaves New York to go work at her former college. In exchange for room and board, she does these odd jobs, and to make matters worse, she's not even allowed to use the dance studio there. So again, so much for career building. She's not really getting anything out of being here. And she's living in this small, cramped, messy dorm. So she goes from, being with her roommate, living with these rich kids, to just regressing, like going back to zero, like rock bottom, like nothing. And everything changes while she's working, she spots her friend Sophie, very drunk, very disheveled, and not as happy as she would have thought. And we find out that Sophie's life, of course, is not picture perfect. She hates Japan, she suffered a miscarriage, and she really wishes that she did not give up her career before meeting her fiance. And she tells Frances that I've always felt in competition to you. And I think what she meant by that is, I wish I didn't care as much what other people thought. And we don't see what Sophie is going through. Like, we don't know how this breakup has affected her. Like, that's what's interesting about the movie. But it seems like she's just in pain not being around her friend, as Frances is. Like, they're in the same level of pain. And the moment that Frances thought that her friend moved on to better things, she tried to do the same. And the happier she thought her friend was, the more miserable she became. Like, a lot of the pain that Frances is feeling is entirely self-inflicted, right? She projects so much of her insecurities onto her friend. At one point, basically telling her, like, you don't even really love this guy, kind of jealous that she's leaving. And I think there's so much pressure to have your shit together, or at least look like you have your shit together. And you look at Sophie from the beginning of the movie to the end, she kind of had this girlish look, but she was maturing. And by the end of the movie, she's a mature-looking woman with a mature-looking man. Whereas Frances is behind, like, this backpack look, this leggings under the dress, the shoes, the disheveled hair. Like, she starts off looking like a college student, but at least she had a boyfriend, to still looking like a college student without a boyfriend, living at a college. And that's a bit disheartening for her. And the thing about Frances is that her look never really changes. Like, it gets more refined a bit, but she never changes the core of who she is. And I think a lot of the reason that she never falls victim to conformity or tries to copy what other people around her are doing, or consider changing her career path, is because she knows who she is. She might not be getting there as fast, but that doesn't mean you have to alter your entire course, right? Like, that's really the test here. The next morning, I thought it was really funny. Like, Sophie leaves her a note being like, thank you so much for your hospitality, I'm going back to my life. And Frances is heartbroken, right? She chases after her friend, and she can't believe, she wants to go back to the good old days. And she really believes that she can't be friends with her best friend unless they go back to it, right? Like, and that's the thing, like, maybe things will not be the same as they were, but that doesn't mean they can't be better. And that's something she comes to realize by the end of the movie. So she stops comparing herself, she stops judging herself, she basically gets out of her own way. She accepts the job that she rejected from the very beginning. She decides to choreograph a routine. And again, maybe it's not the ideal path, but at least it's something. You're still in the industry, but you're doing it in an alternative way. Things might not be exactly as you like, but that doesn't mean they can be better. And this whole dance routine, like, it might not be for everyone. Like, watching this final piece, it was very Frances. It was very disheveled. It was just like a chaotic, but ultimately complete masterpiece. Like, and I think that was the point. You know, Frances might not be everyone's cup of tea, but, you know, at least she knows who she is, and she wasn't really afraid to show it. I think watching Frances was really interesting because there's no actual blueprint to being yourself. And we all have an ideal way that we would like to behave, but there's no ideal way to behave, right? People behave differently depending on who they are. And there's one scene where she's describing her perfect relationship.
It's what I want in a relationship, which might explain why I'm single now. Haha. It's kind of hard to... It's that thing when you're with someone and you love them and they know it and they love you and you know it, but it's a party and you're both talking to other people and you're laughing and shining, and you look across the room and catch each other's eyes, but not because you're possessive or it's precisely sexual, but because that is your person in this life. And it's funny and sad, but only because this life will end, and it's the secret world that exists right there in public, unnoticed, that no one else knows about. It's sort of like how they say that other dimensions exist all around us, but we don't have the ability to perceive them. That's what I want out of a relationship. Or just life, I guess.
And I thought this was kind of perfect, especially when you compare the way she delivered this monologue to her attitude at the end. And one of the things that caused all this tension between Sophie and between Frances is this lack of communication, and everything just riddled with assumptions. Frances keeps saying, I love you. You know, like this phrase, I love you, it keeps coming up. But it becomes more and more unclear as the movie goes on. Like, Frances just assumes that Sophie knows what she means when she says, I love you. But Sophie doesn't, right? Because there's a lot they don't talk about, whether it be the apartment, whether it be her feelings about her fiance, whether it be her true feelings about her career. Like, there's a lot that's just kind of left unsaid. And the more that's left unsaid, the more uncertain this foundation they have is. And Frances just kind of decides at the end that she will never leave things to chance, right? Like, leave no stone unturned. Like that scene when she's talking to her boss and she keeps awkwardly looking at her friend mouthing I love you. Like, she's not the type of person to allow secret worlds to exist without addressing them or calling them out. Like, that's just not who she is. Like, she's very, like, if she has a thought, she will let you know. And I think by the end, she was just done trying to guess what people were thinking. And so she wanted her friend to know, I love you. Sophie knew exactly what she meant by that, so there wasn't any miscommunication about what that meant. And I think the reason that Frances was unable to communicate clearly was because she wasn't all that confident in herself, right? She wasn't confident in her relationships. You know, she couldn't even break up with her boyfriend. She was just looking at him like, I guess this is over. She couldn't communicate with her best friend. She couldn't communicate with her boss. She wasn't confident in her choreography. And so she kind of had to get over all that to just actually articulate what she's saying in the way that is most honest to her. And for that, she got her best friend back. So their lives might not have taken the trajectory that they anticipated, but that doesn't mean they can't be happy in a different way and they can't be happy for each other. You know, things don't go according to plan, but, you know, you plan, but God plans, right? Like, you can plan all you want, but things change. And if you think because they're not going exactly as I want, that they're getting worse, then you'll never find any peace of mind. And so by the end of the movie, Frances is finally in a room of one's own, and she's at peace, right? Like, her best friend, losing her best friend, she feels like she has like phantom limb syndrome, and she really resented her at the beginning of the movie because she feels like she left her hanging, right? The support that she was giving her, without the support, Frances honestly didn't feel like she could make it. But a lot of that had less to do with her best friend and more with her. So all the support that her friend was giving her, she needed to find a way to give that support to herself and just be at peace knowing that everything was going to be okay, and also going at your own speed. Like, this movie is very clever because it's not about it's not about like, okay, you're not as successful as the people around you. Like a lot of people are successful in things and they're not even doing what they love. Frances is odd because she's actually doing what she loves, and everything is triggered when her friend just starts, adulting a lot sooner than she's ready to. And I think that was kind of the beauty of it. It's not about giving up on what you want to do. You got to play with different avenues. And just because things are not exactly as you want them to be doesn't mean they can't be better. And so Frances made it to her apartment. She's feeling like it's very well earned, and all these thoughts, like you can just see it in her body language. Like she doesn't have all those thoughts running through her head. It's kind of like, okay, everything is going to be okay. She stuck it out, and she turned inward, right? She didn't lash out on the people around her, and that, like the way we follow Frances around, I thought was really clever. And watching her, like I could tell everything she was thinking, why she was thinking it. And it's very much worth a watch. So you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.